A teacher tries to make a difference, but pays the ultimate price. Hello, and welcome to Morbid Minutes. Today, we'll discuss the infamous case of Colleen Ritzer, so grab a coffee and kick back. Our story begins in Danvers, Massachusetts, home to about 30,000 residents. The town has a bit of a dark history. You see, it used to be the Salem Village. The name speaks for itself, but if you didn't know, it's famous for 1692 witch trials. Situated in its public schools district is Danvers High School. The school is kind of famous as it banned the word Meep, threatening students with legal actions in 2009. But before the Halloween of 2013, this quirky little school would become the site of a heartbreaking tragedy. It's October the 22nd, a week to go for Halloween, and preparations are in full swing in Ritzer household. But as the evening turns to night, Peggy and Tom Ritzer are getting worried as their daughter hadn't returned home. Their daughter was 24-year-old Colleen Ritzer, a math teacher at Danvers High School. In her own words, quote, "Maths teacher often too excited about the topics I'm teaching." She was the apple of her parents' eyes, always ready to help and kept in constant touch with everyone. So when they couldn't reach her on phone or social media, Tom drove to her school and found her abandoned car in the parking lot, but Colleen was nowhere to be found. They called her friends in hopes she'd changed her plans for the day and was out with someone, but no dice. With trepidation growing, they informed the police of her disappearance. This was around 11:20 p.m. Earlier that evening, on another side of town, Diana was getting worried about her son, who, like Colleen, hadn't returned home after school. Her son was Philip Chisholm, 14, a student of the same school. He was new to Danvers as he'd recently moved from Clarksville, Tennessee. The move was against his will, as his parents just had a bitter divorce. He'd just joined the semester and had no friends nearby, so it was very unusual for him to stay out this late. When he failed to return by 6:30 p.m., his disappearance too was reported. In a bid to find him, police pinged his cell phone, which gave his last known location at a local movie theater named Hollywood Hits. But by the time they got there, Chisholm was long gone. He was later found walking north along Salem Road by Topsfield police officer at around 12:30 a.m. In a pat search, a knife was found on his person. During a search of his backpack, police discovered a bloody box cutter. When asked about the origin of the blood, Chisholm coldly replied, "The girl." In his possession, they found Colleen's credit card, driver's license, and a pair of underwear. Upon enquiry, he lied that he'd stolen them from her car. Meanwhile, the search for Colleen had just begun. During a search of her school and its surrounding area, they found her empty purse behind the premises. The search continued into the morning. By 3:30 a.m., they were in the woods behind the school, where they found Colleen's body lying face up. Partially covered with leaves, she was naked from the waist down, with her legs splayed and posed in a suggestive manner. Officers at the scene also discovered a tree branch inserted in her private area. Her body was bruised and battered, with visible gashes around her neck. About 20 feet from the body, police located a wheelie bin and a pair of bloody rubber gloves. A handwritten note was also found near the body with the words, "I hate you all," crudely scribbled on it. Later that day, a thorough search of the school was underway when police found blood in a second-floor women's bathroom. Upon review of the security footage, they came to a horrifying conclusion that the missing teenager from the night prior, Chisholm, is indeed the perpetrator here. Let's backtrack a bit to noon of October the 22nd. It's the end of another school day, and Colleen has asked Chisholm to stay after school. Another student, who also stayed late that day, testified that Colleen tried to engage Chisholm in talk about how his new community compared with his old town of Clarksville, Tennessee. She said Chisholm became visibly upset and began talking to himself, so Colleen changed the subject. After this, around 2:55 p.m., Colleen heads out to the women's bathroom. Seconds later, Chisholm steps out of her classroom, notices the surveillance camera, and goes right back in. He then comes out with his hood on in a bid to conceal his identity. Putting on a pair of gloves, he enters the bathroom. Here, he attacks Colleen with a box cutter, slashing her throat 16 times before brutally assaulting her. As he was finishing up and putting his pants on, another student opens the door, but abruptly left, thinking she had just seen someone changing. The surveillance then captured Chisholm calmly exiting the bathroom with a blood-soaked hand, carrying Colleen's black pants. He disposed of his hoodie and the jeans he was carrying in the student parking lot. Later, he's seen entering his classroom, A209, where he changes into a red hoodie and jeans. Around 3:14 p.m., he appears again on surveillance, dragging a wheelie bin to the bathroom wearing a balaclava. There, he puts her body in the bin and drags it out to a wooded area behind the school. Here, he assaults her again with a stick and covers her with leaves, leaving her in an obscene pose in which she was found later. "25 minutes later, he returns to the school, barefoot. He then calmly walks to his locker and changes into all black. With his glasses and Nike backpack, he returns briefly to the crime scene at about 4:05 p.m. and exits the school. You see, he'd packed a change of clothes, gloves, and a balaclava in his backpack before attending school that day, apparently in preparation for his heinous attack. He'd stolen her credit card and used it to watch a Woody Allen movie, Blue Jasmine. It's here that police first pinged his cell phone. Hours after the attack, he shoplifted a knife from a BJ's wholesale club, the same knife found by the state troopers. The next day, on the 23rd of October, police arrested Chisholm on the charge of murder. He was held without bail. He was later indicted by a grand jury on 1-count murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault, and 1 count of robbery. On the 22nd of November the same year, a judge ordered a psychiatric evaluation for Chisholm. In 2014, while awaiting his trial, Chisholm committed a chillingly similar attack on another female staff member in the youth facility he was held at. This time, he made sure he wasn't watched by any surveillance camera. As the 29-year-old walked into a locker room, Chisholm took his shoes off so his steps would be quiet. He slammed her up against the wall, then choked and punched her. He tried to kill her by stabbing her with a pencil. The woman was saved after a staff member heard the commotion and rushed in to save her. In connection to that crime, he was charged with attempted assault with intent to murder, kidnapping, and 2 counts of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. Jury selection for his trial began on the 6th of October 2015, but due to his lawyers raising issues of competency, the judge orders him to undergo competency evaluation.
A court psychologist who talked with him says he's suicidal, does not trust his attorneys, hears voices.
And he said he wasn't talking to me, that he was talking to somebody else. And when I asked who the somebody else was, he said he doesn't want me to tell you.
His attorneys have asked for a competency exam. Prosecutors object.
The Commonwealth's position is that everything that has happened for the last 24 hours is not real, is fake.
Jury selection was stopped after 3 days.
On November the 4th, he was found competent. His trial began on the 16th in Salem Superior Court, where he was tried as an adult. The very next day, after recess, Chisholm refused to come out of his holding room in a bid to stall the trial, but the trial continued. The prosecution rested their case on the 9th of December, and the closing arguments were made on the 14th.
Philip Chisholm, a kind, smart 14-year-old, committed these terrible acts when he was in the throes of a serious mental illness.
Set against the backdrop of a horrific crime. That's the final image Philip Chisholm's defense attorney drew of her client, acknowledging that he brutally murdered his Danvers High School math teacher Colleen Ritzer in 2013, pointing to testimony from 3 psychiatrists who suggested he was insane. And prosecutor Kate McDougal painstakingly painted a very different picture. She replayed the video that captured the moments Chisholm followed Ritzer into the bathroom where she was raped and strangled. McDougal even donned the box cutter used against Ritzer in the woods.
She's lying on her back, and he's carving away at her neck. What was he trying to do?
The gloves, the extra bags he brought to school, all signs of sanity, McDougal argued.
Ladies and gentlemen, those videos alone give you deliberate premeditation.
All while Chisholm stared emotionless. Behind him, Colleen Ritzer's mother in apparent agony.
He had a goal, a terrible, terrible purpose, and he played it out in the woods.
Now, the jury has plenty of evidence to go over, including the autopsy photos as well as that chilling video.
The jury returned a verdict after 9 hours of deliberation. He was found guilty of murder, assault, and robbery. They returned a non-guilty verdict for second assault charge, as they couldn't determine whether Colleen was alive in the woods or not, and Massachusetts doesn't have an abusive corpse law. 3 years after the attack, on the 26th of February 2016, Salem Superior Court Judge David Lowy sentenced Chisholm to life in prison with a 25-year non-parole period for his first-degree murder conviction. In addition, he received 40-year concurrent sentences on the assault and robbery charges. This means he wouldn't be eligible for parole for at least 40 years. Trial for his second assault of 2014 is yet to take place. When something terrible happens, people will often say, "It could always be worse," Lowy said. It is difficult for this court to imagine what could be worse for an individual and family to endure than the brutal murder of Colleen Ritzer.
Betrayal and devastation. Just some of the emotions for Colleen Ritzer's family at news that their daughter's killer is eligible for parole after 40 years behind bars.
Although this individual parole amounts to cruel and unusual punishment for Colleen's loved ones, the notion of second chance should not be applicable in this case. Due to the intentional and thoroughly planned actions of this individual, Colleen cannot be provided a second chance, and neither should the individual who callously and without remorse took her life.
In 2013, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court decided that juveniles cannot be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Peggy and Tom Ritzer say that sentences them to a life of pain and inevitable parole hearings that could last years.
The journey to ensure justice for Colleen has just begun.
At the sentencing, everyone was wearing pink, which was Colleen's favorite color. Peggy Ritzer, mother of Colleen, said in her impact statement, "We raised our children to be good, kind, and loving people, and in a matter of minutes, that evil took that away." Let's take a minute to remember the life that was lost. Colleen Ritzer was born on May 1989 in the town of Lawrence. Growing up in Andover, she graduated high school. She then went on to pursue a Bachelor in Arts in Assumption College, now a university. She had a passion for teaching and connected to her students easily. Those closest to her described her as a young woman who loved her job, her students, and life, who never had a negative word to say. A scholarship was set up in her memory named Colleen E. Ritzer Memorial Scholarship for students of Danvers who want to pursue education as a career. In the end, I'll leave you with a message from Colleen. No matter what happens in life, be good to people. Being good is a wonderful legacy to leave behind. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you like this video, give a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to Morbid Minutes, as I post both solved and unsolved cases along with other horror contents weekly. Take care.